Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started, and we expect a few people to come in, but we want to honor your time. It is 2 o'clock, and we have a great discussion and panel group with us today. I just want to say thank you to everyone present for being the heart, hands, and feet of the work that we do as it relates to sharing the information about Tulsa, about Greenwood, about the Race Massacre and Black Wall Street. We thank you for being partners in this type of work because it's not just one person doing the work. We thank you for attending this session and for being with us today. We especially want to take a moment to honor the ancestors of Greenwood, the Native Americans, such as the Caddo, Cherokee, Kickapoo, Kiakapio, and Osage, Muskogee, Ogaspa, and Oceti in the lands for which we are, and within the state for the spirit of harmony that connects all of us in this community. So we know that these are areas, the land with which we are existing, and we want to honor that land. For our panel members, first, thank you to you for being with us today. The expertise that you will bring, the different perspectives that you will bring, we know that is going to enrich our understanding of what we want to do going forward. We do have both an in-person and online audience, and it will also, we'll display this later on our website, so it will extend beyond today. So whatever you say, think that you're going to be sharing information into the future, and that classroom instructors from various age groups, elementary to college, may look at this and appreciate the wisdom that you're going to share today. I want to give a biography for each of the participants, acknowledging that it is merely, this will reflect just a few words of their contributions over the years. There's much more that they contribute, and any omissions are not because they are not important, but because we only have an hour and a half. So I'll start with Hannibal Johnson. He is a Harvard Law School graduate. He is an author, attorney, and consultant specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, human relations, leadership, and nonprofit leadership and management. He has taught at the University of Tulsa College of Law, the Oklahoma State University, and the University of Oklahoma. Johnson serves on the Federal 400 Years of African American History Commission. He chaired the Education Committee for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission and served as the local curator of its world-class history center, Greenwood Rising. And if you have not gone there, you need to go. Put it on your schedule. His books, including Black Wall Street 100, An American City Grapples with Its Historical Racial Trauma, chronicle the African-American experience in Oklahoma and its indelible impact on American history. Johnson's play, Big Mama Speaks, a Tulsa Race Riot survivor's story, was selected for the 2011 National Black Theater Festival and has been staged in Caen, Switzerland. He has received numerous honors and awards for this work and community service, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Oklahoma Center for the Book and induction into the Tulsa Hall of Fame and the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. And those are just a few of his awards. So thank you, Hannibal. And so we can do a little clap here. We'll acknowledge that. And it's always uncomfortable for people when they get to hear their life in words. And so just enjoy, embrace. And then we have Therese Anderson Aduni. She was born in Tulsa and is a third-generation survivor of the 1921 Black Wall Street Massacre. Her documentary, Rebuilding Black Wall Street, made by her father in the aftermath of the 1921 Race Massacre, highlights the resilience and determination of the Greenwood community. You will want to see this original film of Greenwood survivors, Greenwood members who you can see their prosperity, you can see their daily life. You will want to look at that. Adoni advocates for the documentary and accompanying study guide that goes with this work to be included in public, private, and charter school curriculum in economics and social studies. Her father, Reverend Harold Anderson, was an amateur filmmaker who sought to capture the joy he saw in his community. This documentary shows moving footage of men and women who stayed in or came to Tulsa to rebuild the area. Neighbors and friends living and running businesses in Greenwood from 1948 to 1960 are documented. Woven into the documentary are narrations by Anderson Aduni, as well as her relatives, who energized that film with both mature and youthful voices. For archival purposes, rebuilding Black Wall Street may also provide viewers with the extraordinary possibility of identifying their family members when you see them in picture. And we'll give Teresa a round. And last but certainly not least, Carlos Moreno is a graphic designer at CAP Tulsa. He's the Oklahoma's largest anti-poverty nonprofit organization, and he is also a national leader in early childhood education. He also volunteers with Code for Tulsa, working to make sure local government works for the people, by the people in the 21st century, using technology as we would want it to be used. Carlos earned a Bachelor of Arts in Administrative Leadership in 2017 and a Master of Public Administration degree with a focus on civic technology in 2020 from the University of Oklahoma. In his latest publication, The Victory of Greenwood, which we have a few copies on the table to your left, he chronicles and invites readers to view Greenwood from a new perspective through the lives of some of the most prominent figures within Greenwood, such as John and Lula Williams, B.C. Franklin, E.L. Goodwin, and Gene Goodwin. The Victory of Greenwood includes 20 biographies of historically significant figures in Greenwood's history, from its founding to today. And you will note that many of their families are still working in the Tulsa community and across the globe. Let's thank Carlos for that. And now we will get to the reason we are here. We want to hear some ideas. And so just to give you an idea of how the day will unfold, they will answer a few questions for us, and then we will have question and answer following it. Now, if you have an immediate question that comes up, please jot it down so that we can follow up with it in that last portion of the session. So we're just going to start with giving them an opportunity to give us some background to the work that they are doing already. And so we'll vary it. So we're going to start with Carlos on this one, and then we'll vary who we start with on each question. So we have a little bit of variety. Please provide some background to your current projects that you're working on that connect you to the historic Greenwood area. And please share how you think the current generation would benefit from the project's content. And we'll start with Carlos.
Yeah, so I'm actually very excited that this is going to be a little bit of a reveal. The first time I'm talking about these couple projects in public. We have just received funding for a new project that we spoke about in this space late last year for mapping the Greenwood neighborhood. And what we're going to be doing is using various data sources from the 1920 census to city directories and cross-referencing that with Tulsa Historical Society data as well as a couple of other data sources to get a block-by-block, building-by-building map of the Greenwood neighborhood. We talk about how many blocks it was, and we have sort of a general outline of where Greenwood was, but we don't have a building-by-building map that is a complete picture of Greenwood that you can zoom in and out, you can interact with. And what's super interesting is that the Historical Society has this data from 1920, 21, 22, and 23. So not only can you see Greenwood, will you be able to, through this project, see Greenwood as it looked before 1921, but after 1921, and understand how quickly the neighborhood came back and built back. So that's a project that we're just getting ready to kick off and get started this summer. In addition, we're going to be filming some more narratives and collecting more stories as a way to continue the work that I did with the Victory of Greenwood. So we'll be embarking on that project as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll just go to Teresa. We'll just go in the order.
Thank you. So background. Currently, well, first let me say Ikauro, which means how are you, and have a blessed day. I have to start out with that. Currently, I am now working on a talk that I'm going to be doing this weekend with Jack and Jill's of America. They're having their regional convention here in Tulsa this weekend, and so I've been asked to speak with them on entrepreneurship. And what I plan to do is show the businesses that my father captured on Greenwood in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and talk about their collaborative leadership, which means not one person led, but everybody contributed. There is some film, there is a footage in the film that shows men and women at a community meeting, and they're coming out the door and they're stopping and smiling for the camera, but it shows you that they're regular, everyday people, workers. Some of them were maids and drivers for, the wealthy of Tulsa. Some of them worked shoe shine, but everybody contributed in the community. Even the local scoundrel gave his $2 into the pot so that they could build what is now known as the Hutcherson Branch Y over on Pine. So I have in the film the skeleton of the beginnings of Hutcherson Branch. At that time, it was just called the Carver YMCA. But so I'm going to be talking with J&J about collaborative leadership, which means whatever skill you have, and that's how they rebuilt. Whatever skill was available, whatever skill someone had, they contributed that in the rebuilding. I'm working with San Leandro, California. They have a Black Wall Street incubator. And so, again, I'm using the film with workshops with them to map out entrepreneurial steps. I'm using the Ubuntu pedagogy, which is about identifying skills within children and matching them with mentors and businesses where they can increase their knowledge of what they like to do. It's also, the Ubuntu is also about if you own a business and you have people working for you, then everybody owns the business. And that way, the atmosphere changes when you're using this concept, and there's several books that have been written about companies that have used the Ubuntu pedagogy and how it has helped turn their bickering employees and everybody just around to participate in the success of the business. So I'm going to be talking with them about that. I'm a contributing writer to Pure Jazz Magazine. It's an online jazz magazine, but my articles about Tulsa and about the musicians that came out of Tulsa, throughout history. And I'm also in development for a comic book from the film. So I'm looking for a young artist that can draw and take stories of these people in the film and make it into a comic book, which would promote reading, because I'm also a community tutorer. And so I'm learning that when you find a subject with my mentee that is popular, and Black Wall Street is, that they tend to pay more attention. So if I get these comic books done, then at least they could be reading about some of their relatives even. So that's what I'm working on.
Okay, thank you. I do want a clarification. Did you say Carver YMCA?
It was the Carver Youth Center.
Carver Youth Center. So I'm just thinking if I were teaching this, I would be asking students, now what is the previous name of it? Carver Youth Center. I want to make sure I have that. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Hannibal.
So Teresa talked about the relative popularity of Black Wall Street. That is so true. I do a lot of speaking engagements around the country. I do a lot of interviews. I did an interview last week with a station out of Sacramento, California. Sacramento has a Black Wall Street. And so the news media want to make sure that the Black Wall Street in Sacramento understands its roots, which are right here in Tulsa. There are Black Wall Street groups all over the country, and they're inspired by the history here. So we can be proud of that. And it's great to be able to engage with those folks. So I work with the Greenwood Cultural Center mainly on their annual fundraiser, and I've done this for probably 10 or 15 years. The Greenwood Cultural Center is a great asset here in our community at 322 North Greenwood. It's not just a venue. I mean, they have proms are held there, quinceaneras are held there, boxing matches are held there. You just wouldn't believe all the things that can happen at the Greenwood Cultural Center, but it's not just that. They sponsor programs, summer arts program, the Freedom Schools program. There's a rites of passage program called Women of Tomorrow. So it's a real asset that we have in Tulsa that not all Black communities and not all communities have. So we should appreciate that. I want to support that. Greenwood Rising, I was the local curator for Greenwood Rising, the museum. My role was to really shape the narrative. It's a narrative facility, tells the story, the holistic story of the Greenwood District. Right now, I'm on the board. I'm not on staff, I'm on the board of Greenwood Rising. I serve on the Federal 400 Years of African American History Commission, and that commission, I had the commissioners meet here, hosted a meeting in 2019, and the commission has supported some of the work of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission, so that's important. And the last thing I'll mention is that I serve as a member of the advisory board for the Zarrow Commemoration Fund. The Zarrow families set aside $6 million, and they did that on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the massacre. And the idea was that this $6 million would be directed entirely by a board that consists of people of color. And all of this $6 million would go into historically disadvantaged communities. So we make grants every year. We'll be in we could spend the money, I think, in about 5 years, about $1.25 million per year. And we award grants anywhere from $2,500 to $100,000 annually to worthy projects in the community, to projects that serve primarily African Americans or Latinos or Native Americans, people of color. And so that is a really creative and unusual and innovative use of philanthropy to eliminate some of the disparities that we know exist based on color, race.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to go to our second question. We'll start with you, Teresa. Why is the history of Greenwood and the 1921 Race Massacre important to you personally?
I always tell the story. I grew up in Tulsa. I was born here in Tulsa at Moton, which was the only hospital that served the North community. And went to Booker T. Washington High School. I was a cheerleader, the T in Hornets. And graduated in '71 and went out into the world. I had a choice, go to college or career. I chose career. dumb. But anyway, I ended up going to college, but I had to pay it for it myself. But I tell this story because it wasn't until I got to Chicago and they said, "Oh, you're one of those Black Wall Street princesses," and I didn't know what they were talking about. I did not have a clue what Black Wall Street was, what they were saying, what they were referencing. So I called home and I asked Dad. I said, "Dad, they were talking about Black Wall Street. What is that?" And then he kind of, gave me a brief summary of it. But I tell people now, especially since this last year, the commemoration has passed by, and I had an opportunity to interview 8 other descendants of survivors besides myself that I went to school with. And we all had the same story. We did not know about the massacre until we left home. And so the next question, BBC asked me this question, CNN asked me this question, why didn't they talk about it? I said, I'm here, am I not? Because if they did, I would not be here. So what the history of Greenwood, it's a rich history. I feel honored to be called a diva of Greenwood or a princess of Greenwood. It grounds you. It makes me feel confident. When I went out into the world, I was very confident. So I got the benefits of growing up in a rebuilt Greenwood. One of my people that I interviewed, Deborah Hunter, you might know her, she's a poet, a resident poet here in Tulsa. She said that when she found out about Greenwood, she said, I thought I was already living on Black Wall Street. And we did, because it was rebuilt to its former glory. And when we go and shop and visit Greenwood, it was like it was back in 1921. To us, it was like that. So we kind of have the mindset that we grew up on Black Wall Street. And as Hannibal has said, the world focused on us last year, and they're duplicating the Black Wall Street, plan. And there's a Black Wall Street Chicago, there's a Black Wall Street St. Louis, there's a Black Wall Street, they're all over. And so I feel that the history is important to me, that I can be a representative of tenacity and bravery and courage to anybody that feels like they have nothing, because that's what they started from. Nothing. We see the smoldering landscape in the pictures. That was nothing. And then you see my film and you see what they did. So I feel very proud.
Thank you. And you mentioned the film. Can you give us some idea of how people can access the film?
You can purchase, you can go to GettyImages.com, I think, and you can see the whole collection is there. And they're kind of like our agents. A lot of people think Getty owns our film, but the family owns the film. But Getty developed it for us and helped us lighten up some of the dark spots and things. There's still some very dark, images. But if you want to see it, you can see the whole collection on the Getty website. I put together all the different footages. I mean, there's tons of footages. And so I put together, for special groups like this Jack and Jill group, I'm pulling different parts of the footage to tell their story about entrepreneurship. When I did San Leandro, it was more about the people and the businesses. When I did Greenwood Arts Project, that was solely about Daddy. That was solely about my father. So I just kind of built the images around him growing up on Greenwood. And so I tailor it to each organization. But if you want to purchase, you can go there and purchase.
Okay. And so we'll get that. I know the next question would normally be, we want to make sure we have her contact information so that if we want to have her come speak or provide that information, we'll do that. So we'll do that for all of them, so you won't have to wonder if you're going to get it. Okay, so we'll go to Hannibal next for that question.
The history is important to me, I think, for 3 main reasons. One is my father, for a part of his life, was a teacher He happened to graduate from Booker T in 1942. And so he talked about how well educated the teachers were and what a great school it was and all that. And so he instilled in me a love of history generally. And the history here is in many ways emblematic of history all throughout the United States. We're not the only place that had a massacre. We're not the only place that had racism. We're not the only place that had segregation. This is an example of those kinds of places that were all over the United States. So it's important for that reason. It's also important because truth is important. The late history professor Howard Zinn talked about a people's history of the United States. And what he was talking about is creating narratives about the histories that we don't know, that weren't incorporated in our Oklahoma history, our American history textbooks. People like me, people of color, often are marginalized and excluded from mainstream history curricula. And that needs to be corrected if truth matters to us. You can't talk about American history without talking about Black history. And that I tell people all the time, if it was up to me, we wouldn't have a Black History Month. And we wouldn't have it because our history would be incorporated into the regular history where it belongs. And we wouldn't need a Black History Month. The third reason it's important to me is summed up by something profound that I think Dr. Maya Angelou said. She said, "Our history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, it need not be lived again." So we need to learn those lessons that are within our history so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over and over.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Carlos.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm not Black. And I'm not from Tulsa. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. But when I moved here as a young, I was in my early 20s, young graphic designer, first learning how to design websites, there weren't a whole lot of businesses who would open their doors and give me opportunities. And it was the Greenwood community that did that for me. It didn't matter to them what the color of my skin was. It didn't matter to them that I had long hair at the time when I had hair. It didn't matter to them that I wasn't from a prominent family, that I wasn't from some wealthy family, or what my pedigree was, or what part of, the city I was from, which is what you get asked a lot about when you enter white spaces, especially when you're trying to do business. They simply wanted to know, are you here to help us, and what can you do to help us? And a lot of the first websites that I built were for the Greenwood Cultural Center, the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, the Oklahoma Eagle, the Mabel Little House, Vernon AME Church. And so while I was working in that community, and while that community was opening their doors to me, they also kind of took me under their wing. So I learned from folks like Maxine Horner and Don Ross and Jim Goodwin and Jim Goodwin's brother, E.L. Goodwin Jr., and the elders at the time. I mean, they would tell me stories. I would fix Representative Don Ross's. I would sit on his living room floor and fix his computer, and he would tell me stories. And I grew up in a culture where it was important to listen to your elders and listen to their stories. Well, separated from my family, the elders of Greenwood kind of, in a way, became my elders, in a way. And so I would just listen to them and listen to their stories and listen to what they had to say. And the story of Greenwood has stuck with me ever since. I never stopped researching and reading and collecting everything that I possibly could about Greenwood. And so fast forward 20 years, a fellow writer, said, you should do something with all this material, all this room full of stuff that you've collected. You should do something with it. And so that's where Victory of Greenwood comes from. is simply me reflecting everything that the elders told me when I first moved here. And of course, I backed all of that up with research and documentation and, the official records and all that type of stuff. But yeah, it was really just, it was personal to me because this was the community that embraced me when the rest of Tulsa wouldn't.
Thank you. That is very helpful to get this idea of how everyone here connects to Greenwood. And so we're going to go a little deeper into the history portion, and we'll start with you, Hannibal. How does this story and its lessons connect to something greater than Tulsa and our current generation?
I can answer that in two words that I talk about often. The words are shared humanity. So, again, the history in Tulsa, particularly the massacre, is emblematic of the racial history of the United States. We know that in 1919, just two years prior, there were over 24 so-called race riots throughout the United States. In New York and Philadelphia and Baltimore, Chicago, Omaha, Elaine, Arkansas, Longview, Texas, I could go on and on and on. So this was a pattern that was happening in the United States around race and racism. So we need to remember that. But the other thing I think that is the overarching point is that when we allow ourselves to deny the humanity of other human beings, no matter what they look like or what religion they are or whatever, then we risk these outbreaks, these massacres and pogroms and holocausts and all the kind of horrors that can happen. When we don't see the other within ourselves, then we are at risk. We are all at risk. And that's the real big point, I think, that connects Tulsa, particularly the 1921 massacre, to all of humanity, to the Holocaust, to lynchings that were occurring in the United States during that period, to what's happening in Ukraine right now, to religious discrimination and terrorism that's going on in the world. All these things are connected. If we could only conceive in our own minds that every other human being is entitled to dignity and worth and value, then these sorts of things wouldn't happen.
Thank you. And Carlos.
To kind of piggyback off of what Mr. Johnson's talking about, this idea of shared humanity and shared equity. For a little over 15 years, I was an advocate for neighborhood revitalization. And when you get into that field, when you start talking to experts about land use and transportation policy and economic development and the development of social systems, we have this notion of a utopia, and that's a densely populated area, a diverse area, an area that's pedestrian and transit friendly, an area that's collaborative, both in its business networks and its social networks. And this is how you create thriving, vibrant communities. Well, Tulsa had that. And Tulsa built that up from 1905 to 1921, and it was destroyed in a fire. And then Tulsa built that up again from 1921 for another 45 years, had a successful, dense, diverse, vibrant, thriving community. And it's only if we could learn what Greenwood knew about how to do that that I think the rest of Tulsa could thrive. We don't understand that when we built those two highways, it was two highways, 244 and Highway 75, that ran along Latimer, what used to be Latimer Avenue, that had just as many businesses as Greenwood did. When we learn what treasure we had for 15 years leading up to 1921 and 45 years afterwards, what can that teach us about building a greater Tulsa? When we flip that conversation and and start learning from Greenwood, then I can think about building the kind of community that we want to see here for everyone. And like it's been said, that idea is starting to catch hold in other communities like Dallas and Chicago, but we have yet to do that here in Tulsa.
Thank you. Teresa.
Ubuntu. I am because we are. Ubuntu. It is how Nelson Mandela settled after apartheid. Ubuntu. I am because we are. The key to what I am showing with the film, with the footage that I do, is together. They did it together. And coming from another realm, a spiritual realm, I'm a numerologist as well, numerologist, and the word together totals 44, and you add 4 and 4, that's 8. 8 is power. 4 is foundation. So the word together is our foundation. And together we can be powerful. Ubuntu.
Thank you. Powerful words, succinct. Thank you. Ubuntu. Okay, so our next question will start with Carlos. What would you like to see in the schools, in the Tulsa community, in the Greenwood area, that would help us learn and heal from the events of not only the 1921 Race Massacre, but the history of racism and bigotry within Tulsa? What would you like to see, I'll say that part again, in the schools, Tulsa community, and in the Greenwood area?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. When I was writing my book, I spent from 2019 to last year writing my book. And then, of course, going around and talking about it and talking about Greenwood history. And, of course, we're just now kind of peeling away at the history of Greenwood and understanding what that history was. But the more I talked to white folks in this community, the more I came to understand that they don't know their history either. I asked about Route 66, about Cyrus Avery. They have no idea who Cyrus Avery is. Talk about the Spavanagh Water Project. It's one of the greatest water projects in the history of this country, and other cities come to Tulsa to learn what our water treatment system is, what it's like, because it's one of the best in the country. I talk about Lortondale. I talk about the fact that televangelism comes from this place. I talk about Standpipe Hill and these areas of Tulsa and white Tulsans don't know their history either. And so what I'd like to see is more of our history being taught. Let's talk about what the Council Oak Tree was and what it means. We just renamed a school after the Council Oak Tree, and if you talk to most people in that neighborhood, the reason they got angry about it is because they have no idea what the Council Oak Tree is or was. What's the native history of this land? You talked about acknowledging the native ancestors who owned this land. We talk about the land run in sort of this abstract terms, but it's having real implications today. In fact, on this very day, the McGirt case is being heard by the Supreme Court. And so the past didn't go anywhere. And I don't think that we really understand that enough and talk about it enough, how important it is to know the history of this place, for everybody to know the history, all of the history of this place. Black, Native, Latino, and all of the above. You know,
Thank you, Carlos.
we just don't have enough.
Thank you. And I think Carlos brings up what John Hope Franklin would say: if you don't know the history of others, you don't know your history. And so that's part of what you're speaking to as well. So thank you. Teresa.
What I would like to see in schools in Tulsa community, Hannibal's books, Carlos's books, my film and study guide. That's what I'd like to see, because that answers what everything that we're saying. As far as healing from the events, that's up to each individual. I think about when I first moved back to Tulsa in 2002, I think it was, and I came back and I took my dad downtown to City Hall to do some land records, you know, to look at some property records and things. And we waited for like 2 or 3 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, for the clerk that was helping someone to walk away. And so when she finished helping that person, the clerk went back to her desk. And if you've ever been down to the Land Records division of the city of Tulsa, you know all of the clerks sit in a little pool, you know, over the counter. So she went back to her desk, and we stood there another few minutes, and I said, excuse me, can we, you know, get some help here? And the clerk yelled out, "Mary, you have a neck wringer out here." I took a breath, and my dad reached over and he put his hand on my hand, which told me not to say anything, because he knew I was getting ready to go, to be a colored woman. And that was very profound to me, that city officials felt brave enough to insult us out loud, and nobody in the room said anything. Healing. I had to heal from that, because my parents brought me up to speak my mind, to, you know, give my opinion or whatever, to stand by my convictions, and I felt muzzled at that moment, but I was doing it out of respect for my father. And then I had to, when I started self-processing that, it says that he grew up as well as the survivors of 1921, not talking about what was in their face, this racism that was in their face 24/7, 365. Today, it's 24/7, 365. But we have to decide how we're going to deal with that. Becoming angry and matching insult for insult doesn't solve anything. Hitting someone, attacking someone doesn't solve anything. So what do? In this healing, we have to go within and recognize that this person that's insulting me needs prayer or whatever you want to give them, but not, you know, not a slap, not a hit, not a Will Smith sock. But they need something from me. And what do we have within all of us? Love, forgiveness. But you have to be the strong person in order to do that. And it does make you stronger. And you really, and then those kinds of insults, same thing happened last year at the bank. Oklahoma Highway Patrol officer yelled across the bank, "Take off your sunglasses." It was a sunny day. I forgot to take them off. We do that. "Take off your sunglasses and don't roll your neck." Oklahoma Highway Patrol. Okay?
Did you get his name? Badge number?
But what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
we have to deal with that.
Absolutely. So the only thing I say is I'm all for forgiveness, but I'm also for accountability. So I want to get his name.
That too, but
yeah.
But to me, I still am blessed. My life is still, being blessed, and opportunities are coming left and right simply because I used what I was taught, in my spiritual upbringing to forgive. And that is it's hard. It's hard to do. But it makes you stronger. And it makes you, and that person, because you don't retaliate right then, they have to wonder why. Because they were looking for a reaction that you're not giving them.
Yeah,
I
that's
wasn't giving him nothing. I closed out my account.
true. Okay. Just want to make sure.
I did close out my account because the bank employees
They didn't do anything,
They
right?
didn't do anything. They were all just looking at me. It's like I was on TV or something. I was like, whoa. But I didn't have to leave my money there. But what I'm saying is we have to do this from ourself. Whatever something told you, God, Jesus, Buddha, Krista, whoever, something that drives you and activates that love spirit within you, each one, reach one.
And so we're going to answer one more question on this part. Hannibal will go. One thing I just want to note, please, if there's something that's coming up in your mind that you want to ask later, I've heard a lot where I want to just engage. So we saw that there was a little interaction here where they couldn't help themselves but talk to one another. And I know you're having that urge as well. Please write it down, because when we get to that point, we want you to not forget what's in your mind. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are three things. Notice I use a lot of threes. There are three things that I would say we need to do, some of which we are doing to some extent. So curriculum reform has always been a big thing for me, but Tulsa Public Schools has been really a trendsetter, an example setter on curriculum. Tulsa Public Schools has developed curriculum, grades K through 12, to teach the history of the Greenwood District and the massacre, not just in the discipline of history, but in a multidisciplinary way. That's great. The problem on the flip side is the Oklahoma legislature and the governor have signed legislation which suggests that history that deals with systemic issues, they don't use the word in the legislation, but they're really talking about critical race theory, which is a way of looking through the prism of race at things that happen in systems and institutions. So, but this legislation that we have in Oklahoma now talks about not teaching history that makes students uncomfortable and really ridiculous, absurd things that would make it impossible to teach history at all. You can't teach history truthfully without making people uncomfortable. Our history is uncomfortable. That is American history. There are definitely some celebratory, salutary things that have happened, but there's a lot of bad stuff that's happened. And in order to keep it from happening again, we have to know about it. So that's why it's important to teach it. So on the one hand, we have progressive TPS, incorporating this history, trying to teach about systemic racism and so forth. We have the Oklahoma legislature passing laws that say, essentially, let's not talk about this stuff. We ought to create opportunities for people to engage around this history. You know, people have different learning styles. Some people are visual learners, some people are verbal learners, some people are kinesthetic learners, they learn through doing. So we need spaces like John Huff Franklin Reconciliation Park, like Greenwood Rising, the History Center, that allows people access to this history from other than a textbook, different ways of presenting the information. So we're doing some of that. We need to do more of that. And the other thing that we need more of is simply dialogue. John Huff Franklin Center for Reconciliation has a symposium annually that encourages dialogue around these tough issues. They have a dinner that encourages people to come together in a shared space, sit with people you don't know, kind of eliminate the uncomfortability of things like race and religion and so forth. So we need more of that. The city council is about to hold some hearings about the recommendations for reparations that were made by the initial riot commission back in 2001. So that will be an opportunity, I hope, for constructive dialogue And we need that dialogue. We need to air what's really on our minds around this legacy that we're living in the present.
Thank you. So we're going to start with Teresa on the next question. When you consider the roles of each individual, what suggestions do you have for this current generation? For those in elementary school, high school, college, along with churches, business leaders, community advocates, neighbors, what suggestions would you have to offer them to be part of this healing, to be part of this work that we want to do to learn the history and to heal from it as well?
Well, first we have to listen to each other, get to know who you are with. You go to church with people and you see them every Sunday, but you don't really know them. You work with people, you see them every day, but you don't really know them. That was one of the successes of rebuilding the Black Wall Street, was that everybody's talent and connections were put into play. It wasn't just one person ordering people to do stuff. Everybody participated. So I think each individual, it is our responsibility to be the best that we can be, first of all, to be the best person that you can be, and to love who you are so that you can then extend that courtesy to a stranger even. I mean, you just never know what people are going through. They may have a calm face, but they might have just lost a child or something and you don't know. And we're so quick to look at the visual and make assumptions and judgments on what we see. So I think that the roles of each individual is to be the best that you can be and to listen to another, get to know another person. If you don't know about another culture, ask about it. Ask questions about it. I heard this and that, and then they could either say yes or no, that's not true, but if you don't ask and you just go on what you heard and you don't know for yourself, then you're perpetuating information, judgments, racism, all of that you're perpetuating. You don't always have to confront somebody if you don't agree with them. They have a right to their opinion. If you started dialogue and they're very adamant and passionate about the way that they feel, let it go. You don't have to win the argument. That's our ego trying to get in the way. If we move the ego out the way, most of the time we can see each other. We can hear each other. We can see that. But we put on this egotistical, I'm right, I got to be right, I got to have the last word. I won't let you finish your conversation even though we're supposed to be having a group conversation because I have a point I want to make. Just being disrespectful to each other and not really allowing their skills, talent, and whatever gift that they have to come forth, because you don't give them time to do that. So I think each individual person in this healing, and that's what I give to the kids when we talk about, in elementary, when I talk to the kids about the massacre, I put it in the sense of, for them, and I have to kind of be politically correct with this, but I don't talk about it because I'm there for the rebuilding and I'm not there for the destruction, so it's just brief, but I usually talk about it in a sense of two opposing groups didn't agree on something, and one group decided to overpower the other group, okay? So they didn't agree that Dick Rowland was guilty, and one group was trying to protect him and the other group did not. So we talk about game and crowd mentality. We talk about getting caught up in the moment and how you could tell if your heart beats fast or whatever. So 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, they talk about that. They say, when we were, chasing the dog or the kitty or whatever, and I didn't think we should, I get those kinds of stories. So you have to deal with it uno, on yourself. Self, you have to work on yourself and make yourself the type of person that, can communicate with everyone that comes across your path. And if you do have, because I had to work through this, if you do have a prejudice, you got to figure out why you have it. Not just settle with, I have this prejudice toward this situation or this person, but why do you have it? Who told you to have that? That's self-work. You got to go down to that root of why you feeling that way about another person, or you're not listening to another person, or you don't agree with another person. You have to really deal with yourself and figure out why. And you'll find out that it was misinformation most of the time. So, self.
Thank you. Okay, Hannibal.
So again, I'll go to a three-part answer. There are three things essentially I think people ought to do if they really want to be change agents. One, I'll just tell you what they are and then I'll talk a little bit about each. Introspection, engagement, and advocacy. So introspection is a lot of what Teresa was talking about. Looking at yourself, looking at your circle of friends and relationships. Is it diverse? Are you hearing a variety of perspectives? Are you evaluating reliable information? All those things are part of introspection. Michael Jackson's song, Man in the Mirror. Man or woman in the mirror, take a look. You really have to do that. Engagement is get involved with organizations that are already doing the good work that you want done. John F. Franklin Center for Reconciliation, the Greenwood Cultural Center, Greenwood Rising, the Oklahoma Center for Community and Justice. The YWCA has a mission whose at the core is fighting racism. So all these are organizations that are already doing good work. They have a track record. So you can get involved with them if you want to support what they're doing. And then advocacy, it's important that you stand up and speak out in the ways that are available to you. One of the biggest and most important ways that's available to you is voting. And it's not just voting in federal elections. Vote for your school board member because they're making really important decisions. So again, introspection, engagement, and advocacy.
Thank you. Carlos.
I was so lucky to have grown up in the 80s and 90s in the Bay Area. It was, I literally, every single one of my friends had a different background. The family came from a different country. So across the street was my friend Patrick, who was black. One block over was our friend James, whose family came from the Philippines. Down the street was our friend Christian, whose family was from the Netherlands. Down the street the other way, close to the ballpark where we played baseball, was our friend Jeff, whose family was from England. And at their house, they still had high tea at 2 o'clock, I think it is. I had friends who were Chinese and Portuguese and Filipino. And so I grew up in this melting pot. And I never knew that that's not what every city was like. And then I come to a place like Tulsa where everybody sort of staked their own, this is North Tulsa, this is South Tulsa, this is East Tulsa, we don't talk to those people in West Tulsa, we don't talk to those people in South Tulsa. And I'm here in 1998 going, y'all are crazy. Why have you never been, you've never been to a powwow? This is Oklahoma. What are you talking about? You've never heard, I knew about the Flaming Lips in California, and people didn't know about the Flaming Lips here in Tulsa, and they were just down the turnpike. Like, get out of your own community. Get out of your own background. Get out of your own neighborhood. Go out and experience. Eat food that you don't normally eat. Listen to music you don't normally listen to. Attend a church that you wouldn't normally attend. Go to the Buddhist If you've never been to the Buddhist temple in East Tulsa, go there. They give tours. They're happy. If you've never been to the mosque, go to the mosque. They're happy to give you a tour. Go to the Hindu temple. Go to the Jain temple. Go visit. If you haven't been to Vernon AME, if you haven't been to service at Vernon AME, go there. Do it. If you haven't been to a conservative church in South Tulsa, do that. Get out of your own space. Go into spaces that one of the best things that I've been to, and I love live music, and this was the first concert that I had been to since 2019. It was Steph Simon and his group. He brought musicians from Byron Little Africa, and he was playing with the Chris Combs Trio, an all-white jazz band. They came together to play music for a diverse audience. There were black, white, Hispanic, all in this one space to listen to this music. That's what we need to have everywhere.
So Tulsa becoming a larger version of the gathering place.
Yeah.
Every day. Every day.
So
we have one more question here for the panelists. So start getting yourselves ready to bring them questions and make some comments. I know we have a few of you who really are just waiting for your opportunity. But here's the last question for them. How do we move? And we'll be starting with Hannibal. How do we move from voice and discussion and dialogue to change?
One of my favorite quotes is from Dr. King, and it says essentially, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. So I would amend that quote. It doesn't bend on its own. It bends because people bend it. So it's important that we understand our own agency, our own capacity to make change. Talking about things is good. Advocating for things is good. But you gotta actually put yourself in the game and be the agent of change. And it's just one foot in front of the other. I mean, it's not about making immediate, vast changes. It's about making incremental changes, little changes, changes in your own personal life that affect the people around you, and then grow from there.
Thank you. Carlos.
I would actually challenge that. I don't think that we've talked about it enough yet. And I say that because we still talk about the attack on Greenwood in 1921 as mob violence. And that's not what it was. We have names of people who perpetrated this attack on Greenwood. We know that Tate Brady planned the massacre. We know that Henry Sinclair provided the gasoline for the airplanes that bombed Greenwood. We know that T.D. Evans prevented reparations from happening after the chamber announced that they were going to provide money to help rebuild Greenwood. We know that Herman Newblock was getting paid by the city of Tulsa in the same city commission meeting where he voted to change the fire codes to prevent Greenwood from being rebuilt. So we have these names. We have this history. It's written down. It's documented. And yet we talk about it was a mob. It wasn't a mob. This was an organized, coordinated, scheduled. Each one of those planes from Curtis that were dispatched from Curtis Southwest Airfield took 8 to 10 hours to get ready, to get them flight ready. That's 8 planes times 8 to 10 hours worth of work. That's a lot of work. That's a plan. That's a coordinated effort. That's something that the National Guard came in from 2 different branches to Tulsa. The Tulsa Police Department deputized 250 people. That's not a mob. So I think we still need to keep talking about this. And we need to talk about how Greenwood rebuilt. We haven't had that conversation, in my opinion, not enough. We need to talk about how Greenwood was destroyed again in the 1960s. We're certainly not ready to have that conversation. And I think we definitely need to continue to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, that would be my answer. We've got a lot of talking to do still.
Okay, thank you. Teresa, you get to close out the panel for this part.
The word change is an 11. That vibration is universal, would be a good word to express the number 11. So change has to be universal. At the end of my presentation of the Greenwood Art Project that I did in July, I showed a picture of a community tree, and it had 41 branches on it. And each one of those branches, I had a name of an organization that I had volunteered and worked with in some capacity up from the time that I landed in Tulsa until that point, until July 2021. 41 organizations, from the John Hope Franklin to Vernon, a lot of the schools, the YMCA. So change happens when you don't think of yourself, but you give service. That's what changes. It changes you, and it changes the people that you are serving. We have removed ourselves from being servants of each other and being our brother's keeper. And we are, because we're all connected. We are all connected. So change happens when we give. And when we give without expecting anything in return. That energy that is generated from that service, from that act of service, cannot be measured. And you can walk away. I can tell you that when you volunteer, and I always say, I'm only going to do 4 hours, and then I end up doing 8 or 12. But because it's helping, and the feeling that I'm getting because I see the results and the people that I'm meeting and getting to know, it enriches me and it makes me shine, and the people are attracted to that light, and then it goes on and on and on and on from there. So change happens with you, and change happens when you serve others. I am because we are.
Thank you. And so we're going to, well, first, thank you for the discussion with the panelists. And so I will acknowledge at this point that panelists, the food in the back that you're going to get plenty of, please continue to get some. All of this has been brought to us through the Oklahoma Humanities, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the TCC Foundation, and Tulsa Community College. And those are the reasons that we're here. And they don't always, what we promote is that free expression of speech and perspective, although it may not reflect the actual organizations presented there who support this free dialogue, they do support bringing this discussion to us. And so we thank them for that opportunity. And so now what we're going to do, what I will ask you to do so that everyone will hear you, including we have an online audience. So when you have a question, I know this will be challenging sometimes for you, but if you would just come to the front and just say what you have so that and you can come right over here and it'll pick up your voice, and I'll move over to the side. So first person with the question from the audience, please feel free to come forward. I'm going to not call any names.
Awkward.
He's just walking
No,
through.
he's just walking through.
Hello, Chad.
So thank you, panel. This was really good. I felt really good about the answers. They were quite, I guess, healing in the moment of what maybe me as an African American should be doing or looking at it. However, is there a place, because at the same time, you know, in 2002 and 2017 or so, your experience, and I've experienced many of those things throughout this, and with House Bill, was it 1775, I believe, with all of this going on, is there room for militancy in this healing? Maybe not violence, but confrontation. So when we're teaching about the Civil War, for instance, and what that fight was all about in pre-Civil War, and black children feeling a certain way, because I remember when we talked about the Civil War with me growing up, that there was some cultural pain that I felt being the only black child in a classroom full of white people laughing at me because I'm black, and we're talking about slavery and the fight for that. So I don't know if there's a reverse side for that to talk to our state legislators or even in our nation and have conversations. Is there room for militancy in this healing process?
Anyone can answer.
I mean, I think it depends on how you're defining militancy. Nonviolent, yeah.
Confrontation, but nonviolent.
Yeah, more direct confrontation. Yeah, I think there are people have different styles of engagement, and I think that you use the style that suits you best to try to get whatever it is you want accomplished. Violence is out. We're not talking about violence. We're talking about So when I was in law school, for example, we were concerned about diversity. So there was a time when people of color took over the president's office and had the 60s style sit-in. That's a much more direct than writing a letter to the president of the university. So there's definitely room for that. Because I think some people respond really only to the more direct kind of confrontation. Some people respond only to the kind of confrontation that is going to exact an economic consequence. So I think we need to think about all sorts of approaches and you tap those approaches that best suit us as individuals.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
I was just going to say my way of attacking it is through my tutoring. 1770, the bill 1775 is out, and it's on. There's a proverb that says, if the door is closed, go over the seal. So, and that's what our ancestors did. The doors were closed to them, but they still rebuilt. We have that within us to do that. So I'm tackling it one kid at a time. I tutor. When I tutor them in American history, I also bring Black history, same year, same month, whatever, because it's out there if they look for it. So when they're bringing me Civil War, I go, did you also know that? Mm-hmm. And bring them the Black history. So one-on-one, we can get that, because if we put it in our children and they understand that they can do the critical thinking themselves, they don't have to be in a classroom to do critical thinking. It is our responsibility as elders, like I was told by my elders, the history. It is up to us to do that to the children. So one way, nonviolently, is to go ahead and proceed with the education and educating our children so that they can change it. I want legislators. I don't want basketball players, and I don't want, movie stars and stuff like that. I want legislators, I want bill writers, I want judges, I want all of that from our children, and that's what I'm doing to help, to fight that.
Okay, so who is our legislator who brings up the statement, by any means, what's the word? By any means necessary? Who is the person who says that?
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X? Well, the one who recently passed, John Lewis.
Oh,
Yes, he says that so much that any means necessary. A lot of things that he did would have fallen under this militant perspective. Come right up. I'm just filling up space until you get here.
Well, again, I want to say this has been a very informative conversation. I feel very enriched. But my question is, we have competing agendas that have been presented. Different organizations, and I think about just the celebration of healing as relates to the massacre just last year. So we had many people come to the city, poured into the city, but we had different organizations doing different things that were competing. And so how can we collectively work to address not only healing, but moving forward, but do it in a way that is collective? And I understand we have different ideologies and different perspectives of how to do it, but it was disheartening for me because I saw wonderful established organizations, but they weren't working in tandem. And so when we work collectively, we grow, right? And we, as a city, make a movement. But I see there are different competing organizations not working in tandem to address issues of race, of equity, of you name it, right? All the isms. So could you all speak to that? How do we bring all these individuals to the table and work in tandem? Thank you.
Well, I mean, that's the $64,000 question. I mean, there really is, the only answer is that we have to continue to try to be welcoming and open to others. We have to stake out common ground and make sure that people understand that there are overarching goals that we can all support, even though our tactics may be different. We have to be less egocentric, because a lot of times ego and personality of individuals is what drives that inability for groups to collaborate. And all those things require constant work. There's no guarantee that everybody's going to be working together toward a common purpose. That would be nice, but I don't think that's the reality. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It's an aspirational piece.
There's a lot that you can get done if you don't care about who gets the credit. And I think a lot of what you saw and have seen is this entity over here, that entity over there, they want the credit for having done this or having done that. But if they were to just set that aside and not care about who gets the credit for it, I think you would start seeing a lot more collaboration and a lot more networks being built. There's also a power dynamic. If all of those entities are separate or competing or territorial and they're kept apart, then you wouldn't see their collective power. So there's a great book, two great books. One of them is called Winner Takes All, and the other one's called The Givers. And both of them are about the way that philanthropic organizations operate in cities so that they can have more power over what happens in that city than they operate almost like a proxy government, right? And so I think that's something that we need to really take into account. It's an enormous blessing that Tulsa has as many philanthropic organizations as it has, but that comes at a price. So we need to look at what that price is and how it affects the power dynamics and how that works within the city.
I have a project that I want to start. I've been talking about a capital campaign for Theater North. And when I was making my pitch to a couple of their directors, I mentioned that there was World Stage Theater that's here now. There's Pocketful of Hope that's been around and done very well with our young people. It's a drama group. But Theater North is an icon in Tulsa. It is a premier theater. It always gives us historic drama on stage. And I really want to see the community come together, and I really want to see these 3 theater groups form under one roof. I told them, find some place to build, let's build us a master theatrical organization that can train our children, they can write their stories, we can teach them lighting, sound. I said, you can't get to film until you're on the stage. If you understand the stage, then you do very well in film. And I have 30 years in theater, so I know what I'm talking about. I've seen both sides of the stage and film production. So collaboration, that was what, that word is one of my favorite words, and it's an 8, power. So getting, another idea I had was every church in North Tulsa have a community fund where the members can contribute to the community fund, and it goes into like a credit union or whatever that can be owned by the churches, so, every representative, and then fund the business. Every church has an entrepreneur that needs some help, and so this community fund can go. Next one on the list gets the $10,000. Next one on the list gets the $10,000. Just collect it like that. That would be, to me, the epitome of collaborating and leaving out these egotistical, showcasing that goes on. So we have a long way to go, but all we can do is just whisper, drop those seeds when you can, encourage, young people. Again, our future is sitting at our feet, looking up in our mouth. That's where the change is going to happen. We can't do anything, but we can give them our perspective so that they can critically think about how to solve the problem, So collaboration with all the way that everything is right now it's a difficult task, but we got to roll up our sleeves. We got to get to work. And again, it starts with us.
Thank you. So based on our time, we have about 5 minutes. I'm just going to ask, I don't think doesn't appear that someone's running up at the moment, so our 5 minutes, what I would like to have happen is if each panelist just says 1 minute, last words, last thoughts of this healing and learning purpose that we're here for today. Last words from you, and we'll start with Carlos and we'll end with Hannibal.
Yeah, I would say just seek out those organizations that are trying to move forward, that are trying, to collaborate. The Tulsa Chamber recently, in fact, I believe it was in 2020, leading up to the commemoration in 2021, they released all of their meeting minutes from the year 2021, and they said, we don't know what's in this. We don't know. We have no idea. Good, bad, ugly. We don't know. But we're going to release this information to the public and have everybody learn from this history. And I applaud the Chamber for doing that. I think it was a very bold move. on their part. And in these meeting minutes, you discover that the chamber initially supported reparations for Greenwood as early as June 7th of 1921, but they were shut down a couple of weeks after that. And that's what bears out in the reading of these meeting minutes. All Souls Church has also come forward and done a few steps forward in the hard work of reconciling their very difficult history, with the founder of All Souls Church being the editor of the Tulsa Tribune that published the article about Dick Rowland and Sarah Page. So they have had this difficult past. They have benefited from the racism of the Lloyd Jones family, yet they have come forward and said, we're not going to hide. We're going to face this head on, and we're going to work through this history and figure out what we need to do as an institution to move forward. So I think that, yes, I've talked about a lot of critical things that I have that the city needs to do, but I also think there's a flip side to that, right? And we do need to acknowledge and encourage more institutions to do that and come forward and do that hard work.
Thank you. And Teresa.
I just want to leave everyone with, and thanks again for your attention and for being here today. Thank you, Dr. Dickens, for inviting me. If you get anything from Ms. Aduni today, it is, I am because we are. That would be the main thing that I want to leave, the Ubuntu. I want to leave that with you because I'm planting that seed today. I planted that seed. Whether or not you till your garden and grow it, that's up to you. But I did what I was supposed to do today. So that's all I wanted to leave you with. Peace and love.
Thank you.
So I'll use this last minute as an altar call.
No cash trays going on.
Yeah, I'm not taking up a contribution. But it's very simple. One of my favorite quotes comes from Arthur Ashe, the late, great tennis player and humanitarian. And really, when thinking about making change or social justice and wondering what you, the individual, can do, he would say, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Simple as that.
Thank you. And so special thanks to you for being here. Thank you to the online audience. And of course, again, I'll point us to those who have made this possible: the Oklahoma Humanities, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the TCC Foundation, and Tulsa Community College. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So one thing, I would be happy